can you list off some of the diverse capabilities that successful crit racers have?
Yeah.
This is a super interesting topic.
Yeah. So obviously you have to have big neuromuscular strength or power. You need to be able to jump quickly. You have to cover things. You have to initiate things. You have to sprint. You don't have to sprint, but if you want to do well, you're going to have to sprint.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to have good endurance. The events are at least 40 minutes, right? Or maybe
30 minutes
maybe
for
30 minutes.
For lower categories.
But still, you got to have a reasonably big engine to ride hard for 30 minutes.
Up to an hour.
You got to be able to change tempo.
Minutes,
So you have to be able to load the muscles up, clear the muscles. So you got to have a big aerobic motor to clear the lactate. You got to have a big anaerobic motor to generate the lactate. You pretty much got to have it all. I mean, criterium racing incorporates a little bit of everything. And then if you're going to be a breakaway type of crit racer, you got to have big muscle endurance.
Yep.
On top of it.
That's the interesting thing about a criterium racer is I feel like you can be faced with any sort of requirement for a fitness profile or something like that at any point in a criterium. Whereas, I guess, sure, you might be able to argue that in a not competitive time trial field or something like that, you could have poor pacing. But in that one, it's kind of like there's this clear path in terms of how to be successful, usually.
This is for diverse. You can be a one-trick pony where all you do is sprint or all you do is when the pack slows down, you do a 40-minute solo.
Yeah.
And there are some guys who are strong enough to pull that off every single time. It's ridiculous. So you can, especially if you recognize that as one of your strengths, fully pursue totally that route. Yeah.
And it could be the fact that where we usually race is the Northern California, Northern Nevada region, but Northern California, it's an extremely competitive region in terms of road cycling. So
highly competitive.
There's a big depth of experience as well as a lot of fitness. Mm-hmm. So there are certain regions where there's a lot of fitness, but not quite as much experience, or a ton of experience, but maybe not as much fitness. But what you get is, in this case, you can have the same course and you can race it 15 times, and 15 times it will end up shaking out differently. Like the demands of the event will be different, even though it's the same course. And that's what's so interesting about criteriums is that usually the courses are kind of simple, at least it's short laps. So it's not like, anything that's changing or has a huge unique part in it. So really, it kind of neutralizes the course in some respects, and it's just however everybody else wants to play their cards, all the racers do, that's how it ends up going.
Game of chess. It's always different.
Yeah. Same board,
that's one of the many aspects of it that makes it so fun.
Yep.
Yeah, so I feel that, last year was the first time that I've actually focused on sustained work, even though it was very minimal amount of time to be able to do that, but still sustained work. And I feel so much more comfortable going into like the thought process going into criteriums now, because I feel like I have another ace in my pocket.
I think in this case, the build is pretty flexible. I mean, sweet spot base is where I'd pretty much send anybody.
Yeah.
And then I'll just jump right to specialty and say crit plan. Mm-hmm. There's every other. I mean, it's specifically dedicated to making you a good crit rider, and that's part of the reason why the build is a bit flexible, because you can focus on maybe you're not really good at sustained power, so you choose a sustained power build and you improve that. And then you come into the crit plan, you have 8 weeks to hone your criterium specific fitness.
Yes.
So the build is the most flexible of the 3 phases there.
I feel like the build is more of like the less specific fitness, and it covers more bases in some respects. And then the specialty phase. So for me, for example, what I would do if I was prepping for a season of crit racing is I would do general and maybe even sustained, or I might mix in some sustained workouts into something like that, and then go and sharpen things up with the shorter, harder stuff. Because I know for me that I react very quickly to that sort of training, the shorter, harder, repetitive stuff. So I'd rather kind of shore up some other sides of things before I go into that.
I think it's a good thing you think about what are my weaknesses versus my strengths. And if I'm getting dropped from surges, well, maybe I'll do general build or short power build. Yeah. But if I'm not...
Oh, surges, sorry. Yep.
And then if I'm not, and I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna win a breakaway, I'm gonna do sustained power build. If I say I'm gonna win in a sprint at the end, or this is really surgy crits that have like little hills, I'm gonna do short power build. Or if I want to be more of this all-around person where I'm gonna have a really high chance to win any race, general build.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm not. I want to be flexible, because a lot of times the race doesn't play out how you want it, so you don't have a chance.
You have to be adaptive.
Yeah, to use it.
Capable in a lot of ways.
And then so that's how I would pick it.
I feel like it's like the best way to increase like your win percentage in a lot of ways in criterium racing is by making sure that you're not just a one-trick pony, basically. Like
many arrows in the quiver. I mean, you become a more or a less predictable rider. People don't know what you're going to do. I mean, if you are a one-trick pony, it's really easy to anticipate what that guy's going to do. You race with the same group a few times, and you are that one trick.
The group will mark you.
Or they won't. They'll just know that,
right.
He's going to take off and ride solo for 40 minutes, so we just have to get it together for 20 minutes to bring it back. He'll be tired, and we'll roll by.
Yeah, it's kind of a situation where there are racers locally here that are able to pull out any number of different options to win a race. And what you end up doing is you end up working so hard to cover a lot of their moves or to try to put them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, when they're a threat on a lot of levels, they're
hard.
They're a big concern, a going concern throughout the entirety of the race.
Yeah. So this year for me is focused on road stuff. And my wife, because there's a lot of Northern California races, but they all take 10 hours or 8 hours in the weekend to drive
it's
there
it's
and back.
Weekend because 3 to 5 hours of driving.
So I asked my boss at home if I could go, and she said, "You can do those as long as you don't do that stupid Leadville thing." So
it's one or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So I was like, okay, I won't do
go.
the stupid Leadville thing, and I'll do these road races. But for me, I want to ask you a question, Chad, of what I should do. So I was talking with Pete here, and I love to talk tactics with Pete. I don't have a very great sprint. I can put out a lot of power in the saddle. So first question is there ever a reason to, I'm going to use sprint or maybe a long sprint in the saddle without being out of the saddle?
Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
I mean, you don't have to stand to sprint. I mean, that's in the classic sense, that's a sprint, but you can sprint seated, and a lot of riders can generate a ton of power. I mean, it's not going to be like an explosive 8-second sprint from the saddle, but it could be a really powerful 20, 30, 40-second sprint from the saddle. And I like them simply because it's a great way to sneak away from a group, whether it's a sprint, a preem sprint or a finish sprint. Staying seated and powering away on the outside of a turn, it doesn't raise the hackles like an out of the saddle, all limbs body flailing, really aggressive attack.
What Pete says,
it's stealthy.
He always talks about those seconds of reaction from the group, and he goes, if you can get 3 seconds where they look at each other, that is the difference, especially on the end in the last lap, versus the instant response. I think to your point is, if you're out of the saddle sprinting super hard,
it's like, come get me.
I'm gonna go.
Come get me.
It's like the rabbit with the dogs, right? They just can't help it. But when you're kind of down, and especially if you can make it look pretty fluid, it might be a couple seconds because it doesn't seem like it's going as fast.
Seriously, and when that 2 or 3 second gap opens up and it's 1 or 2 laps to go and people are preserving themselves for that sprint, they are so much less likely to want to do that much work and then hope they still have something left for a sprint. Yes. So it can that 2 or 3 seconds can grow into 4 or 5 or 6 seconds before you know it. You've got enough gap. All you have to do is stay on the gas, and it's yours.
I want to clarify something on this too. This isn't a field sprint technique. This isn't a coming across the line technique.
No, this is
when you're sprinting across the line. That's when you're out of the saddle. And if you don't know how to sprint out of the saddle, I see a lot of people like in lower categories, like they'll cross the finish line and they were in the saddle the whole time and kind of going against a field sprint. It's fine if you don't feel comfortable doing it, for sure, but it's something that I would definitely encourage you as a crit racer
to
learn that.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not talking about staying seated and sprinting against a bunch of guys that are out of the saddle putting out max torque.
This is a different type of sprint. In fact, let's just put it in quotes. It's a sprint.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a long sprint. Let's just call it a long sprint.
And this is like where, so I regularly, because I have a really, really effective snap out of the saddle, I can accelerate very quickly for a short period of time like that. And I'll use that many times because it doesn't feel particularly draining to me. And I'm able to, snap up onto somebody's wheel very effectively and then, ride their wheel and a brake. But I always end up signaling folks, right? Always with that sort of thing. So that's something that I think, even though you may feel like it's very effective to get you to where you need to be, hopefully you can train a different side of things so that you can still not throw up those alarm bells. Because honestly, many times in a crit race, you will not be the fastest person or in a crit, and you will still win because you were just the one that made the right move at the right time, or somebody else didn't make the right move at the right time.
The other thing about being seated is you give off less of a draft, especially, and you are more aero. So maybe I'm putting, I start with 1,000 watts seated, which I can do, and that's not going to be obviously as much as an out of the saddle sprint, but my frontal area is so much lower.
Totally.
But so let's go back to that thing where it's maybe last lap or something, and I get a 3-second gap. Well, if I'm up and I'm standing and someone tries to bridge up, they have a much bigger wake behind me to get.
Yeah,
totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And what we know too from the all the wind tunnel stuff, and cyclists should know this, is so if I'm traveling, let's say 35 miles per hour, but I have a good 3-4 second gap, the riders that have to come into my draft don't go 34. They go even harder.
They have to go harder. To
Right?
get
They
into
go
the draft.
36, 37. And to get into that draft, because wind resistance goes up exponentially as you're going faster, they have to go even harder.
Yes.
So that's why having that little gap can really help. And if I have a less of a wake, it will take them longer to get into my draft.
And that's why you really want to, like when you're chasing on, you don't start to ease up when you get close. That's why you go until you latch onto that wheel.
Because then it really drops off.
Yeah, that's
Because
a
you're
mistake
spending-
you only have to make once or twice.
Yep. Yeah, and I know it's tempting because you feel so tired and it's hard.
And
But
you feel like you're close enough, but you're
Yep.
just not. It's
Close that
such a
distance, or
downer.
else it's going to, you're spending so much time, or you're spending more time working harder. That's basically the way to look at it.
So people are going to race against me. Don't just pretend I didn't say this.
Okay, you've got a
Disregard.
question, right?
One of my best moves that I've done before is 45 seconds to 1 minute left in the whole race. I go as hard as I can,
You've got really good capabilities. there.
anaerobic capacity. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think I can do, just recently in a workout inside at the end of an interval thing, I did 600 for a minute. I think I can get that probably to 700 or more, and that's with a good, I could go to 1,000 and then kind of die down to get that break. So my strategy is, especially with 45 seconds left, the sprinter people, they look at each other. Because to pull that back, especially if I can come from the back, and we have another crit video on YouTube where Pete Morris does this really well. If you can come, really it's an attack from the back. So you come in
5-6 riders back, maybe.
Yep. And you can get speed before there's a
Yeah,
reaction.
you could actually start farther back in the field from that.
Yeah,
Totally.
Pete does.
Yeah.
And it's really too, you kind of got to figure out, so this corner everyone slows down, and if I take this wider line, I don't get a draft, but I can get more speed.
Yeah, our
So-
local crit course has a corner that is just perfectly set for this sort of tactic.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is, if I can get that, and at the end, that's when, especially in the lower categories, people look at each other. When you have a team, it's different, because a team, two people can like kill themselves or destroy themselves to catch back up, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The lower categories, they say, you get that because I want to sprint.
Yeah, exactly.
If I bridge everyone up to you, I automatically am going to get 20th place.
Yeah, totally.
So if that is my tactic, Chad, what kind of workout should I do to perfect that 45 to minute power, all out power? Not repeatable, just all out.
45 to 60 second repeats at all out power. Come into the workout rested, go as hard as you can for each of the repeats, and recover fully in between them.
Yeah,
and
that's
for,
a big part,
for,
right?
For a 1 minute effort, that's everything in the case of these. Otherwise, you turn it into more of an aerobic sort of benefit, and you're not growing that anaerobic capacity, which is what you're targeting right here. So in the case of a minute repeat, you'd probably recover anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes in between repeats. I'm talking like full recovery, noodling the whole time. By the time you're ready to go again, you're breathing through your nose, you're bored with recovery, and you hit it hard again. And then you turn the workout off when you're not reaching those, within whatever percentage. I'm not going to put a hard number on it, but when you notice you're kind of your power's fading a bit, and what were 700 watt or 600 watt minutes have dropped to 550 or 530. It's time to call it a day.
Should each one be all out, or do I want to be at like 95% so I can do more of them?
It's a question of the workout. I mean, you can get benefit from both. So you could do 2 or 3 extremely hard efforts, and that is a solid workout. A sprint workout, basically 3 30-second wind gates, or 60 seconds in this case, that's a sufficient workout. It's for a lot of people, that will be a sufficient stimulus. For more experienced racers, maybe you need to accumulate more time, which means backing it off 5 or 10% and doing an extra 5 or 6 sprints. So
Cool.
Now I know the card you're going to play.
Well, I could do a breakaway too.
It's true.
well, and even if, so you do that approach, you get a 2 or 3 second gap. That already is discouraging. But someone gets up to you and you're still drilling it. So that's 15 seconds into what you're going to do for a minute. And they have to hang in there for another 10 seconds, another 10, another 10. At some point, a lot of those riders come unglued. They're like, nope, this is not happening.
What I want to do is, and you can get to the point where even if they know your strategy, they can't beat it.
You're
You know what I mean?
stronger. You're still
Exactly.
stronger. Yeah.
So it's like hill climbing in the tour. Like, oh, he's going to attack on this hill.
There are a few
Everyone
things
does
as
that.
satisfying as riding someone off your wheel. Being in front and riding away from somebody. That's there's no bigger ego.
What I
boost.
don't want though is in that last lap, someone ride on my wheel, and I just bring them up the whole way, and they're doing 400
The right
watts per
guys,
minute,
the
which is
right
very
guys will
doable.
do it too.
I know.
yeah.
So don't don't do that. At
should've-
least let me
Nate,
win,
you-
people.
Nate, you should have said like, I want to go for a long bomb or like the final sprint finish. You just said.
Oh yeah,
something
I'm
like
going to
that.
sprint behind someone in the last 100 meters.
Yeah, exactly. That's your tactic.
No, I do want to try. I'll do different tactics, but
course.
that's one where I think I just talk about strengths and weaknesses. If that's a strength, I want to train that strength and have it be another.
Why not?
It depends to the course. Like
for
some
sure.
courses, they're just so packed, jammed. Like I can't do that strategy.
Well, big
Right.
fields, yeah. I mean, you'll spend half or more of the race just positioning yourself for a move like that. It
Yeah.
can be pretty tough, but with our local course, you can make that work just about any time.
Totally.